Now, so far, we've thought of the labor market as spot markets, where we don't really consider firms hiring workers for long periods of time. We're just focusing on that initial time period. Now, experienced workers can bring a level of knowledge and expertise that can only be gained through those years of experience. But working somewhere for a long time can kill your motivation, especially if you don't find the work valuable. Likewise, sometimes great effort and skill are required for a specific job, and the performance of workers are extremely important for the firm's success. Some firms pay workers an hourly wage and then pay them more to work overtime. Some pay a salary and simply ask that all the work get done. There are many different payment schemes that firms can use to keep workers motivated, and how they are structured can be important for a firm's success. So in this chapter, what we're going to do is look at certain types of payment schemes, mostly incentive pay, but we'll look through a few other ones as the chapter goes on. Now, there are two simple types of payment structures that we can compare in order to start our analysis for this chapter. We can look at the piece rate and the time rate. Piece rates compensate the workers based on their output. So they could be paid $10 for each pair of pants that they sell, or receive 5% commission of each sale that they close. Workers that are more productive or more skilled, meaning that they produce more for the firm, receive higher take-home pay under a piece rate pay system. Now, the time rate is different. This is what most people are used to. It simply pays workers for how long they spend working, regardless of their output. Firms sometimes really like to use piece rate systems, but it's important to use it in the right context. When it is easy and cheap to monitor the output of workers, piece rate systems can be very useful. Some jobs are done alone, where you are responsible for your own output. So it's easy to count how much is produced at the end of the period, and each worker can be rewarded for their effort involved in their work and rewarded accurately. When it is appropriate, piece rate payment schemes can attract and retain the most able workers and encourage the poor performers to leave. So it can be a great tool for firms. Now, why wouldn't firms want to always use this to maximize effort and increase their productivity as much as possible? The main reason is that monitoring can be costly. For instance, often workers work in teams, or multiple roles are instrumental in creating the final product being sold, even if they're working on their own at the time. So how do you give just one person credit when so many people are involved in creating the physical product or the eventual outcome? It can require a lot of monitoring, literally paying someone to watch each person produce and then to divvy up the credit for each one. Or you can imagine an office worker who has every single keystroke monitored as a way to track their production. Few workers want to work in this type of environment where they're constantly being monitored so closely. Also, sometimes it can just incentivize the wrong thing. For instance, workers may just try to maximize their salary by producing as much as possible, but completely ignoring the quality of what they're producing. Workers also may not appreciate being able to, or not being able to anticipate how much they earn each week or each month because of the differences that result from the payment scheme. That said, incentive pay is a powerful tool that firms can use to motivate workers by tying their pay to their performance. One of the simplest, most common forms of this is the piece rate pay. Again, so workers are being paid based on the amount of output they produce instead of that fixed hourly wage like we typically see. So in a piece rate system, someone working in a factory or picking fruit on a farm can get paid more based on how much they pick or what their exact output is. As they put in more effort, as they produce more, they earn more. So this creates a clear incentive for workers to produce more. So this model we're going to be exploring shows how output is determined for workers who are paid by the piece. Specifically helps us understand how this piece rate, so what a worker is being paid per unit of output, affects their effort, their productivity, and ultimately it's going to affect the firm's total output, which is why they're excited to pay this or willing to pay this. So let's turn to an example. The piece rate worker is going to want to maximize their utility. And utility is being broadly defined. Utility involves more than just how much money they make. In this model, they're also going to want to balance an increase in salary with the amount of effort that they're willing to put in and day out on the job. Now, there are times that I would rather just play on Twitter or do fantasy football with my friends rather than plan out lectures or grade exams. But I know I have to get a certain amount of work done. So I'm willing to give up this short-term enjoyment for my salary. Now, the piece rate worker faces a much clearer decision in this type of situation because our worker is paid a flat rate per unit produced. The rate, R, and the marginal revenue curve are horizontal. You can see right here, this is the rate they're being paid and the marginal revenue they're receiving. Because it's horizontal, the marginal revenue is equal to the rate R. Now think of the marginal cost of the worker as the marginal effort. So this marginal cost curve is upward sloping. As the employee wants to try to produce more, they have to supply more effort, but more effort is costly to them. Each worker is going to produce until the marginal cost is equal to the marginal benefit or the marginal revenue. So right here, where the marginal cost curve crosses the marginal revenue curve at that point, that's the level of output and the level of effort that they will supply. So the production level Q star is chosen by the average worker. But all workers tend to have different skill levels. So this marginal cost able right here shows a worker that is more skilled than this average worker with the first marginal cost curve. It requires less effort for them to produce the same level of output. In this case, this worker is so much more skilled than the average worker that they're shifting the curve really far over. But sometimes the marginal cost curve could be right here, just slightly more skilled than the average worker. So if this worker is willing to supply the same level of effort, they can produce a lot more, have a much higher output than the average skilled worker. Now, because they're producing much more output and being paid the same wage rate per unit of output, they're going to end up with much more money than this average worker who's producing the smaller level. Now, workers for a firm paying a time rate face a different decision. So if you're just being paid for the hours that you're in the office, you face a much different decision for how much effort you want to put into your job. So they will tend to try to do the bare minimum so that they don't get fired. Of course, maybe we can complicate this a little bit and say they put in a little bit more effort because they want to get a promotion down the line or something like that. But the basic idea is that individuals are going to try to minimize their effort, minimize the pain or discomfort they're going to have to go through. So they're not going to put in their maximum effort. And we don't have this incentive like we saw on the previous slide to get them up to produce more. So their decisions are going to be totally different because they don't face the decision where one additional unit of output directly results in higher pay.